The first full-length film featuring a fictional plague of zombies, White Zombie, directed by Victor Halperin, premiered in 1932 and chose to depict the science fiction monsters as metaphorical representations of slavery, based on Haitian beliefs viewing unpaid labor as a kind of living dead. This historical perspective offered a narrative of how the metaphor of plague and invasion originated as a means to explore themes of globalized discrimination. While zombie films have since evolved into differing subgenres of dystopia and post-apocalyptic, themes of segregating borders and misused governmental power persists, often in the context of mandatory quarantines, closed borders, and communities in conflict with each other due to isolation. I've chosen to explore this concept through an alternative lens, arguing that the recent science fiction presence of artificial intelligence is used as a new representation for plague and invasion, and how this metaphor works in tune with zombie films to evoke problems of globalized and porous borders and power. The screen text I'll be looking at as a case study is the 2023 sci-fi film The Creator, directed by Gareth Edwards, that follows the journey of an ex-Special Forces agent amidst a futuristic war between the human race and advanced AI. To first bridge these metaphors of zombies and artificial intelligence, we can look towards David J. Gunkel's essay on How to Survive a Robot Invasion, detailing the growing relationship between humankind and AI. In particular, Gunkel identifies the terminology's origin in fiction, dating it back to a 1920 Czech stage play by Karel Capek entitled Rossum's Universal Robots, in which the term robot itself was first used and roughly translates to servitude/labor. This first depiction relates this embodied artificial intelligence as artificial slaves, created only to appeal to humans in both industrial and home life as automated service and entertainment. In this analogy, as robots and artificial intelligence can be seen as unconditional and automated servitude, one can relate them in concept to the appearances of zombies in fiction as a representation of slaves. Raphael Hornan draws on this analogy in the context of the first fictional presence of zombies as inspired both by the Haitian Revolution and an insensitive depiction of the horror of the time, fearing being trapped without consciousness in a body out of one's control. This threat is then largely unsuccessfully dealt with through repression and restrictions to human life. In The Creator, we can see an example of this link between metaphors in the presence of AI droids and how they're viewed by some of the characters as an invasion not unlike those of zombies. And a core part of the story's conflict is the varying governments of a futuristic society seeking to either eliminate or coexist with the new wave of artificial servitude. The film also crucially depicts the division between Western societies and the East, in which the former desires the eradication of all AIs, while the latter has learned full integration and coexistence between the two. The AIs, though personified and embodied to look humanoid, still only exist in the context of assisting humans and directly opposes the government's designation of them as an invading threat. Some fear it, others successfully interact with it, and the film represents a government that deals with the perceived threat through biopolitical tactics identified by Foucault's theory on biopolitics and biopower. Michel Foucault's theory primarily looks at the politics of governing societies as biological subjects and the mechanisms of power that come with controlling these societies and their undesirables. In History of Sexuality, Volume 1, Foucault identifies power as a right of seizure of biological subjects and life itself, and death as the counterpart that enforces regulations. He looks at governments' biopolitical risk response strategies to perceived threats as seen through historical case studies of plague and disease, and designates discipline as a primary type of controlling power over a modern subject consistently under surveillance. This surveillance is represented directly in The Creator in the form of a government satellite capable of shooting missiles to targets below. However, what is more crucial is the distinction of death as a counter to government control due to its inherent lack of control and predictability, and how this appears in science fiction often in the form of zombie invasions that disrupt societies and the structure they depend on. Consequently, artificially designed bodies can exist as a metaphor to the living dead, and the Creator uses this metaphor to evoke the modern-day problems of globalized governmental power through the cruel decisions frequently made to sacrifice human lives for the sake of attempted stabilization. But really, it's about how much the higher powers fear a lack of control over their citizens. A scene in the third act best showcases how both fictionalized Western and Eastern governments view artificial intelligence and their respective responses. In it, the audience witnesses as an entire village based in New Asia, a futuristic union of Eastern nations, is placed under siege by American forces and punished for fostering the coexistence. Mild content warning for violence ahead. Intentional shots include both faceless droids and those given a likeness, living amongst and actively partaking in a Buddhist-inspired community, pointing as evidence of successful immersion. But due to the insubordinate actions of the protagonist, the village is collectively punished and consequently destroyed by the government's aerial surveillance system. In tandem with so-called biopolitics and biopower, comparisons can be made towards any instance in human history of bombings as both corporal punishment and a means to be rid of whomever is deemed a threat. In direct comparison to sci-fi plagues and invasions, the threat is often taken out without care for the civilians that are caught in the crossfire. In The Creator, we see an instance of a government using seizure as a means to contain the undesirables, both AIs and the humans that foster them, and excessive power as both punishment and a response to failed containment. So, in conclusion, while metaphors inevitably change and evolve over time, familiar themes will always be present in these varying forms. Initially, a common way to portray plague, infection, and/or the threat of invasion was to fictionalize zombies that spread quickly to society and threaten instability. This essay compares the use of artificial intelligence as a modern representation of the same threat, one that evokes globalized problems and a government power responding to perceived threats with more violence. Thank you for listening.